And when governments look at how to adopt smart city solutions, the path to adoption is not clear-cut. Every city has its own unique needs based upon the regional geography, population demographics, and the composition of the local economy. The communications industry is in a unique position to assist governments to overcome the challenges of urbanization and address the current and future well-being of metropolitan populations. Here at TIA 2015 Network of the Future to tell us about smart cities is Brandie Nonnecke, R&D Manager for CITRIS. That's the Center for Information Technology, Research, and in the Interest of Society. Also with us is Gary Bolton, Vice President of Global Marketing at ADTRAN. And on the end is Sangit Rawlley. He's Managing Director of the Business Strategy Group, inCode Consulting. That's part of the Ericsson Group. And panelists, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I know your last name is Nonnecke, and I said it wrong, but I'm saying it right.
All right.
Welcome to the program. Thanks for being at the show. This is our first panel this Wednesday to kick off the second of the three-day show, TIA 2015 Network of the Future. Of course, we're talking about smart cities. And Brandie, I want to start with you. Let's talk about what the first steps are in implementing a smart city and gauging the needs of the local population and then sort of reverse engineering from there. Is that how it works?
Exactly. I think it's really important for governments to reach out to their citizens and engage them fully in the process of developing a smart city. I believe that public-private partnerships are a top priority in the development of smart cities, and being able to develop tools and applications for smart cities, we must first ask citizens what they need and actually use them as a creative resource, because they are innovative and they can innovate these new ICT platforms.
So I completely agree with what Brandie said. I would add a couple more things to what Brandie mentioned here. One is there is no one-size-fits-all approach. So every city is very unique, and you need to take into consideration some of the unique characteristics of that city. For example, the culture, the demographics, the density, the topography, before you come up with what specific initiatives you want to drive forward. And then the second is, you need to have a larger vision, and you need to make sure that every initiative that you have aligns with and furthers that vision along as part of your smart city vision. Yeah.
Sangit or Gary, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just that, when you think of a smart city, you think of really 8 key elements, things like education, healthcare, mobility, transportation, energy, social networks, security. And so really look at all those elements. And when you think about and talk about smart cities, you really think about urbanization and people kind of moving into cities and being more efficient and more productive. But what we also see is that people move away from cities to be able to have smart communities. And one of the programs that ADTRAN launched last year was enabling communities, connecting lives. And this is really about creating gigabit communities. And so what we saw is that for these small towns that wanted to, really, they might have been a tobacco town or a steel town or some kind of industry that has died, that by putting a gigabit infrastructure in and becoming a smart city, it really drove economic growth. So it's not only, how do you urbanize, but how do you really be able to allow people to not have to sit in 2 hours commute and have to live in the Bay Area to be in innovative communities, but they can move to rural communities and really have the same access to the same things and the same technology and the same level of innovation that you do in metro areas.
Could I ask
Sure,
a question?
please.
So for these rural communities that now have gigabit, and you said it contributes to economic development, how? What did you see?
Yeah, so some of the studies that we've done is that we've been tracking broadband. So what ADTRAN does is we're one of the top 3 global providers of broadband infrastructure. And so what we saw is that we were on a trajectory to hit about gigabit is what network demands in about 2020. And Google came in 2011 and disrupted it, saying, hey, we need a gigabit now, and started the whole Google launch. And so what that created is this whole drive to gigabit communities. And so what we saw is that while the NFL cities were out trying to match Google, whether it's an AT&T or a CenturyLink, to say, hey, we're going to provide a gigabit infrastructure. And then federal funding allowed very rural communities to leverage federal subsidies to be able to build out fiber to the home. We had this kind of area in the middle where there was no federal subsidies and Google wasn't going to come in and build them. And so what they saw is that, hey, if you put in gigabit infrastructure, then innovation will happen, incubators will happen, and as those people, those startups and that innovation moves to that city, like a Chattanooga, then what happens is those people need to eat, so restaurants, people need to sleep, hospitality, and it drives a lot of economic development.
So you're seeing people moving to these cities because of the availability of gigabit.
Communities, yeah, so not smaller.
Smaller areas,
right.
And developing innovation and incubators.
Exactly.
Startups.
Exactly.
Right.
So, and it's not about just being able to have more bandwidth to do the same things you did, in a non-digital environment. We saw that. It's kind of, think of it like Yahoo and Google, right? Yahoo just took ads, digital ads, and displayed them like they would in print, where Google really changed it with, paid per click and just really changed the industry, kind of like Uber changed the taxi industry and so forth. So it's taking this gigabit community and transforming education, transforming the way you connect with government, transforming healthcare. So you really have to leverage that smart city and really make it smart and really transformative.
Sangit, what are some of the challenges with urbanization, and how do technologies like sensor networks, big data and analytics play a role in that?
Well, very important role, right? So, if you think about any smart city initiative, I think you can look at it from 3 different perspectives. First is connectivity. How can you leverage connectivity to enhance some of the initiatives that you have, to gather real-time data, to collect data from different sources? I think the second lens is you need to have a coordinated approach. So what we have seen so far is that a lot of the initiatives work in silos. I think the real smartness comes out when you tie different initiatives together, and big data is one of the key platforms that allows you to do that. And there are some examples that I can get into. So for example, in California, if you're going driving on 101 and you are at point A, you have these big signboards that tell you it's going to take you 50 minutes to reach the SFO airport. But you have to realize that there is a BART train that runs parallel to it, and BART has its own time schedule and things like that. So by in itself, both of them are very smart by themselves. But the real smartness comes out is when you combine the 2 systems together. So when I'm driving on 101 and I'm stuck in a traffic jam out there because there is some event that's taken place, if it tells me not just that it's going to be 50 minutes to reach SFO airport, but if I take the next exit, there's a BART train that I can catch which will get me to SFO airport by so and so time, that's when I can make real smart decisions. And that, that's the big data analytics platform that allows these 2 siloed initiatives to come together. And the third lens is what I call conserve. And what I mean by conserve is there is a shortage of capital dollars. So we have to find, that's one of the challenges. So we have to find opportunities where we can reuse and redeploy the existing infrastructure for multiple initiatives. An example of that would be, there is a partnership between Philips and Ericsson, where Philips is installing all the LED and smart lighting in cities, and Ericsson is using that same light poles to deploy Wi-Fi and wireless infrastructure on top of it. So that's an example of how you are, maximizing the use of your existing infrastructure and using your capital dollars more efficiently.
That's exactly right. So if you have data and you have something you can measure, then you can improve efficiency. So if you look at, just trying to get through DC, I jump in a cab, only going a couple miles, but I'm sitting there and it takes forever because of traffic, or if I'd got in the metro, then I would have been able to get where I needed to be on time, and be able to collaborate with the different devices and apps to be able to say which is the best method for this moment in time to get across Washington, D.C., or whether it's across the Bay Area. But the other thing that we look at is changing people's behavior. And so being able to measure things, we were just talking about Fitbit. I see that just by my family's, the way they change, they know exactly how long they slept, they know exactly how many steps they took, they can put in their calories and know how much they ate. And so what it does is it changes the behavior, saying, do I really want to have that second helping of something, because then I know I have to do X number of steps, and so it's making a smart decision. Or is it on the energy in my house? Do I have my heated floors in my bathroom? Do I want to run those all day, or what's that costing me? So you can start making decisions, and so that you are, really improving the quality of your life, but in the same, reducing your costs and conserving energy, and so there's a lot of benefits on being able to use data to make better decisions, and then overall, as these things all tie together as a network, it really drives conservation.
Brandie, there's some inherent challenges and strains on any large or small city across America, right? There's strains on energy grids, on public safety networks, on water services. How does predictive automation relieve that strain?
Well, I think that by using sensors that are connected within a connected network and then applying that also to big data analytics, we are able to better estimate demand and prepare for demand and be able to reallocate resources. And then also I think the long-term effects will be able to look at the trends in each of these vertical sectors over time and make policy changes, perhaps.
Yeah, so, I'm sorry. Yeah, so one of the gigabit communities that we enabled this past year was in rural Indiana, and it was a dairy community, and so it was all about using sensors to optimize production of dairy. And so, we've talked yesterday, we had Kroger in here talking about how they're using beacons in the aisles of grocery stores, and to be able to improve the efficiency of shopping. You can present coupons when someone comes by your beacon. You can find out if someone's forgot to get an item. So it's really being able to use these sensors to do not only make everything more efficient, but also be very targeted on things like advertising and other areas.
Sangit, critical infrastructures and predictive automation. What's the...
Well, very strong linkage between the two. Both have to go hand in hand. Especially with predictive analytics. I'll give you an example. I come down on this Dallas North tollway, and I pay a lot of toll, right? You come in peak hours, it's more like a parking lot. And every time I wonder, why am I paying money if I'm not really moving fast on this tollway, right? How can you use predictive analytics, and Brandie mentioned crowdsourcing earlier, and how you can incorporate or involve some of the citizens in there to drive more efficiency with these critical infrastructure, right? So, for example, there is an initiative that City of Los Angeles has undertaken, which is called the LA Express Park. I think it's in collaboration with Xerox. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to collect parking data on parking meters from the commuters, and that data is then broadcasted back to the law enforcement agencies, and they're back to the people who are looking for parking spots and things like that. And then they're using that data to kind of do some kind of using predictive pricing mechanisms, and that in turn is managing demand and supply, right? So they're increasing the price of the parking meters. If there's a lot of demand, they're reducing it and things like that. So that predictive analytics becomes a mechanism to manage the demand and supply and manage the critical infrastructure. So I think those are the kinds of initiatives that you'll see more and more as we move forward in this with smart cities.
Gary, when municipalities are making this transition to a smart city, and I'm not going to use the word challenge, I use the word pitfall. What pitfall can they find themselves in?
Well, it's really a big challenge. For example, I'm from Huntsville, Alabama, which is ranked as one of the top 10 smartest cities in the world. So it's all rocket scientists and genome researchers and so forth. But yet we see businesses getting up and moving an hour down the road to Chattanooga because it's a gigabit community. And so recently, Huntsville launched an RFI to become a gigabit community. And so the big challenge here is, while Huntsville Utilities has a lot of dark fiber, it's not really in the business of being a telecom provider. The city isn't in a position to want to launch its own network. So how does it be able to come in and get a provider? So Google's not necessarily going to come in there. So or AT&T's not necessarily might not do it. So how is it going to get a provider to do that? And so it has to look at some combination of a public-private partnership to be able to get out, to have the investment to drive out the gigabit infrastructure. And so now on the flip side, we see companies like C-Spire who are lighting up gigabit communities across Mississippi, and this is a privately held company, all in private investment, and they are absolutely looking for a return on investment. So they are not relying on government subsidies or any other way to be able to do this, but they basically said, if your community wants to be a big gigabit community, you come see us. So they don't call on them, they let the community come to them. They hand them their franchise agreement and says, we can't make any changes, you can sign up, and then you'll become a gigabit community. And what that allows is people now can live on a beautiful lake or in a beautiful community, or maybe where they grow up, and have the same kind of benefits that they would have if they were living in San Jose.
Sangit, and I'm going to ask all three of you the same question, by the way. Sangit, I want to ask you a future question. What's on the smart city horizon, if you will, that maybe we're not hearing about just yet?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think what we need to do is, let's put things in perspective. I think we're going to have 50 billion devices, connected devices at some point. There, you can argue whether it's going to be 5 years or 10 years, but there is no argument on the fact that there will be billions of connected devices. Now let's just put this in perspective. So if you have 50 billion devices globally that are connected, let's assume 10% of them are in the United States. That's 5 billion devices. Let's do the 80-20 rule. So 80% of those devices are, let's say, in the top 100 cities. So that's roughly 4 billion devices. And if you divided them by 100, on an average 400 million devices per city. We have around 400 million wireless subscribers today in all over the US, roughly around that number. Now we're talking about 200 to 400 million connected devices per city, whether they are sensors, cellular connected devices, all kinds of devices. How do you manage those devices? How do you basically make sense out of the immense amount of data that is being produced out of those devices? So the futuristic platforms that you need to kind of manage these billions of devices, the networks of the future will need to change to basically kind of able to work with this new demand that's going to come onto the devices. I think that's where you will see, those would be the future enablers of smart city innovation in my mind.
Gary?
I look at it as the application. So I absolutely agree on managing devices, but if you look at the applications, I think they have to be transformative. And if start with education, I spend a lot of time, we adopt a middle school and working with them. And so it's not, when you see these one-to-one initiatives, it's just not handing kids iPads and PCs and saying go at it, but it's how do you transform from this cohort type of education system that was from the industrial age to being able to have accelerated learners and allow people to do, really motivate kids to be able to really engage and to change the way that the classroom becomes more like a base camp, and that you're able to allow kids to accelerate and find their own passions and work at their own pace. And so I think that if you think of a way, like I mentioned, Uber or Google and others have been transformative in the industry. Looking at every one of these aspects of whether it's energy, transportation, healthcare, and make those things transformative.
I think that we shouldn't just think of smart cities as connected devices, but connected people and connected communities, and that these communities are creative, very intelligent, they have a passion about their city, and if we could just tap the collective intelligence of our city dwellers, I think the impacts are going to be profound. Exactly.
It's collaboration that really accelerates innovation. And so by allowing everybody, as you said, more people and allow more collaboration, that will really move us forward.
Well, it's always fun to talk about a progressive vertical, if you will. We have somebody from the research perspective and two guys from the equipment supplier perspective, if you will, service supplier perspective. So it's good to have all three of you on the panel at the same time. I'm sure we'll do this again. Smart cities is an exciting topic, and we like to talk about it as well. So thanks for your time.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And for all of TIA Now's coverage of TIA 2015 Network of the Future, please log on to tianow.org. So long.